This photo of two friends seemed cheerful until experts noticed something hidden in her hand. Laura Bennett had restored thousands of photographs during her 15-year career, but nothing had prepared her for what she would find in a water-damaged album discovered in a Boston attic in October 2024. The estate belonged to the recently deceased Eleanor Whitmore, a 93-year-old woman whose family was clearing out her Victorian townhouse in Beacon Hill before putting it on the market. The photograph was tucked between pages of crumbling tissue paper, protected just enough to survive more than a century of New England humidity. The image showed two young women, perhaps 19 or 20 years old, standing on what appeared to be a wraparound porch with ornate columns and decorative railings, typical of late 19th century architecture. Both wore high-necked white blouses and long dark skirts. Their faces were turned toward the camera and, remarkably, both were smiling, unusual for photographs of that era. The young woman on the left had dark hair pulled into a severe bun, her expression warm but guarded. The woman on the right had lighter hair, softer features, and a smile that seemed almost defiant. Their hands were positioned carefully. The dark-haired woman's arms hung naturally at her sides, but the lighter-haired woman held her hands clasped in front of her waist, her fingers curled in an awkward, deliberate way. Laura began the restoration process, scanning the image at extremely high resolution to repair water damage and fading. It was during the digital enhancement that she noticed something that made her breath catch. In the lighter-haired woman's hands, barely visible in the folds of her dark skirt, was the unmistakable outline of a knife handle. The blade was concealed by fabric, but the positioning was deliberate. She was gripping it firmly, ready to use it. Laura zoomed in further. The knife had an ornate handle, possibly silver or carved bone. This wasn't a kitchen utensil or a casual pocket knife. This was a weapon, and it had been deliberately hidden in plain sight during what appeared to be a friendly portrait. She turned the photograph over carefully. Written in faded ink was a date, June 14, 1891, and two names, Catherine and Rose. Last afternoon of innocence. Laura's hands trembled as she photographed the inscription. Last afternoon of innocence. The phrase carried weight, finality, foreboding, loss. Combined with the hidden knife, it suggested something terrible was about to happen, or had just been planned. She needed to identify who these women were and where the photograph had been taken. The architecture of the porch provided clues. The ornate columns and detailed railwork suggested wealth, probably a private residence in an affluent neighborhood. Given that the photo had been found in Eleanor Whitmore's estate, there might be a family connection. Laura contacted Eleanor's granddaughter, Michelle, who had hired her to restore the family photographs. "Do the names Catherine and Rose mean anything to you?" Laura asked. "This photo is dated 1891. Michelle paused on the phone. "My grandmother never mentioned those names specifically, but I know the house in Beacon Hill has been in our family since the 1880s. Her great-grandfather, Harrison Whitmore, built it in 1885. Let me check the family tree." 20 minutes later, Michelle called back, her voice uncertain. "I found something. Harrison Whitmore had a daughter named Rose, born in 1872. She would have been 19 in 1891. But there's something strange. She's listed as dying in 1891, the same year as this photograph. No cause of death recorded. And Catherine?" Laura pressed. "That's even stranger. I found household records from 1890 showing a Catherine Murphy employed as Rose's lady's maid. She was born in 1871, just 1 year older than Rose. But after June 1891, there's no record of her at all. She just vanishes from the household accounts." Laura felt her pulse quicken. A wealthy young woman who died mysteriously, and her maid who disappeared at the same time. And between them in a photograph, hidden carefully, was a knife. "Michelle, I need to see any records your family has from 1891. Diaries, letters, household accounts, anything. This photograph is documenting something significant, and I think your ancestor Rose might have been involved in something that was deliberately hidden. Do you think Catherine hurt Rose?" Laura looked at the photograph again, at the way both women were smiling, at how their shoulders touched in easy familiarity. "No," she said slowly. "I think they were protecting each other from something, or someone." Then Michelle granted Laura access to the Whitmore family papers, stored in bankers' boxes in a climate-controlled storage facility in Cambridge. The collection was extensive but disorganized. Generations of letters, legal documents, household ledgers, and personal effects jumbled together with little cataloging. Laura started with documents from 1891, searching for any mention of Rose Whitmore or Catherine Murphy. She found household ledgers first, meticulously recording every expense. Catherine Murphy's wages were listed monthly through June 1891, $12 per month, standard for a lady's maid. After June, the entries stopped abruptly, replaced by a notation: staff restructuring. No replacement hired. No replacement. If Catherine had simply left for another position, Rose would have needed another maid. Wealthy young women in 1891 didn't dress themselves or manage their own daily routines. The absence of a replacement suggested Rose no longer needed a maid, because Rose was gone too. Laura found Rose's death certificate next, filed with the Massachusetts Registry of Vital Records. Date of death, June 15, 1891, just one day after the photograph was taken. Cause of death, accidental fall. Place of death, Whitmore residence, Beacon Hill. Attending physician, Dr. Edmund Hartley. An accidental fall. Laura felt skepticism rise immediately. Young, healthy women didn't typically die from falls in their own homes. And the timing, one day after a photograph showing her maid hiding a knife, was too convenient to be coincidental. She searched for any newspaper coverage of Rose's death. In 1891, the death of a wealthy industrialist's daughter would have been news. She found a brief obituary in the Boston Evening Transcript, dated June 17, 1891. Miss Rose Whitmore, beloved daughter of Mr. Harrison Whitmore and the late Mrs. Margaret Whitmore, passed away at her family home on June 15th, following a tragic accident. Miss Whitmore, aged 19, was known for her charitable work and gentle disposition. Services will be private. The family requests no visitors during this time of mourning. The obituary was remarkably brief and uninformative. No details about the accident, no mention of how it happened or who had witnessed it. And that phrase, "the family requests no visitors," suggested they wanted privacy, perhaps to avoid questions. Laura needed to find out what really happened in that house on June 15, 1891. Laura tracked down records for Dr. Edmund Hartley, the physician listed on Rose's death certificate. He had been a prominent doctor in Boston, serving wealthy families in Beacon Hill and the Back Bay. His practice records had been donated to the Boston Medical Library after his death in 1920. The library's archivist led Laura to a collection of leather-bound journals where Dr. Hartley had kept detailed notes on his patients. She found the entry for June 15, 1891, and her hands began to shake as she read: called to Whitmore residence at approximately 7 a.m. Found Miss Rose Whitmore deceased at the bottom of the main staircase. Mr. Harrison Whitmore stated his daughter had fallen during the night. Body showed extensive trauma to the head and neck consistent with a fall from height. However, I noted several concerning details. Bruising on the upper arms, suggesting she had been gripped forcefully, defensive wounds on her hands, and the positioning of the body seemed inconsistent with a simple fall. When I attempted to examine more thoroughly, Mr. Whitmore became agitated and insisted I complete the death certificate immediately. He stated his daughter had been prone to dizzy spells and that the fall was simply a tragic accident. Given Mr. Whitmore's standing in the community and his evident distress, I complied with his request. But I remained troubled by what I observed. The household staff were conspicuously absent during my examination. Highly unusual. Laura read the entry 3 times, her mind racing. Dr. Hartley had suspected something was wrong, but had been pressured to declare it an accident. The bruising on Rose's arms, the defensive wounds, these suggested she had been attacked, not that she had fallen accidentally. And the household staff were absent, including Catherine Murphy, who had disappeared the same day. Laura found another entry dated June 16, 1891. Received a visit from police officer inquiring about Miss Whitmore's death. He seemed skeptical of the accident determination and asked specific questions about the injuries I observed. Before I could provide detailed answers, Mr. Whitmore arrived and dismissed the officer, stating the matter was closed and that his family would not tolerate further intrusion into their grief. The officer left, but he provided me his card and asked that I contact him if I remembered anything else. Officer name, Patrick Sullivan, Boston Police Department. Officer Patrick Sullivan had suspected foul play. Laura needed to find out if he had pursued the investigation and what he might have discovered. The Boston Police Department's historical archives were housed in a secure facility in Roxbury, accessible to researchers by appointment only. Laura explained her investigation to the archivist, a meticulous man named David Chen, who seemed intrigued by the case. 1891 is early for our organized records, he explained, but we do have some case files from that period, especially for deaths of prominent citizens. Let me see what I can find for Rose Whitmore. He returned 30 minutes later with a slim folder. This is everything we have. It's not much. The case was closed quickly. Laura opened the folder carefully. The first document was a brief incident report dated June 15, 1891, filed by Officer Patrick Sullivan. Responded to Whitmore residence, 47 Beacon Street, regarding death of Miss Rose Whitmore, age 19. Father, Harrison Whitmore, reported daughter fell downstairs during the night. Body discovered by Mr. Whitmore at approximately 6:30 a.m. Household staff not present at time of discovery. Dr. Edmund Hartley pronounced death and attributed to accidental fall. Requested to examine scene and question staff. Mr. Whitmore refused, stating matter was private family tragedy. No evidence of forced entry or disturbance. Case closed per captain's order. The case had been closed the same day, before any real investigation could occur. But tucked behind the incident report was another document, a handwritten note on unofficial paper dated June 20th, 1891, 5 days after Rose's death. Personal record, not for official file. I do not believe Miss Whitmore's death was accidental. Dr. Hartley's reluctance to discuss details, Mr. Whitmore's aggressive dismissal of questions, and complete absence of household staff all suggest something being concealed. Most troubling, spoke with neighbor who reported hearing raised voices and a woman's scream from Whitmore residence around 2:10 a.m. on June 15th, hours before Mr. Whitmore claimed to have discovered his daughter. Neighbor also reported seeing a young woman matching description of lady's maid Catherine Murphy leaving the house hurriedly around 3:00 a.m., carrying a bag. Attempted to locate Catherine Murphy for questioning. No forwarding address. Family in Ireland per immigration records. Mr. Whitmore claims she quit without notice and left city. Captain has ordered me to drop inquiry. Whitmore is major donor to Police Benevolent Fund. I am recording this in case future evidence emerges. P. Sullivan. Laura's heart pounded. Officer Sullivan had known. He had pieced together what really happened, but he had been silenced by corruption and Harrison Whitmore's influence. Catherine Murphy had left the house at 3 a.m., hours after a scream was heard. Rose's body was discovered at 6:30 a.m. What had happened in those 3.5 hours? Laura returned to the Whitmore family papers with new urgency, searching specifically for anything written by Rose herself. After hours of sorting through boxes, she found a small leather journal tucked inside a hollowed-out book, a common hiding place for private writings in the Victorian era. The journal was Rose's diary, covering the years 1889 to 1891. Laura's hands shook as she opened it. The early entries were typical for a young woman of privilege, accounts of social events, descriptions of dresses, mentions of suitors and parties. But as Laura read forward, the tone changed dramatically. An entry from March 1890 read, "Father has been different since mother died. He drinks more now, and his moods are unpredictable. Yesterday he became angry when I questioned his decision to dismiss the cook. He grabbed my arm so hard it bruised. I hid it from Catherine, but I think she knows. She sees everything." The entries grew darker. April 1890. Father came to my room again last night. He says he is checking on me, but the way he looks at me has changed. I lock my door now, but he has keys. I am afraid, and I do not know who to tell. Catherine has become my only true friend. She is the only one I trust. Laura felt sick reading the words. Harrison Whitmore had been abusing his daughter, and Rose had been trapped in her own home with nowhere to turn. May 1891. It has gotten worse. Father's visits are no longer just visits. I cannot write what he does. The words are too terrible. I told Catherine everything tonight, and she wept with me. She says we must tell someone, but who would believe me? Father is respected, powerful. I am just his daughter, his property. Catherine says she will protect me. I don't know what she means, but I trust her completely. The final entry was dated June 14th, 1891, the day of the photograph. Catherine has a plan. She has been saving money and has contacts who can help us disappear, both of us. We will leave tonight after Father sleeps. Catherine has taken a knife from the kitchen. She says if Father tries to stop us, she will use it. I am terrified but also hopeful for the first time in months. We took a photograph today on the porch, just the two of us. Catherine wanted to remember this moment, our last day in this prison. Tomorrow we will be free, or we will be dead. Either is better than this. Whatever happens, I am grateful Catherine loves me enough to risk everything. She is not just my maid. She is my savior and my truest friend. Laura closed the diary, tears streaming down her face. They had planned to escape together. Catherine had brought the knife to protect Rose from her father, but something had gone terribly wrong. Laura needed to piece together what had happened that night. She returned to Officer Sullivan's notes and cross-referenced them with the diary. The timeline was becoming clearer but more tragic. According to the neighbor's account, raised voices and a scream were heard around 2 a.m. Catherine had been seen leaving the house at 3 a.m. Rose's body was discovered at 6:30 a.m. But Rose's diary suggested they were planning to leave together. So why had Catherine left alone? Laura searched through the Whitmore family papers for any additional documents from that night and found something unexpected. A letter, never sent, written in a different hand than Rose's. The handwriting was less refined, with spelling errors, likely written by someone with limited formal education. It was dated June 15, 1891, and began, "To whoever finds this." Laura's breath caught. It was Catherine's testimony, written in the hours after Rose's death. "My name is Catherine Murphy, and I am writing this because the truth must be known, even if I cannot stay to tell it myself. Miss Rose Whitmore did not fall down the stairs by accident. Her father, Mr. Harrison Whitmore, killed her, and I could not stop it. Rose and I had planned to leave that night. We had packed bags and hidden them in the servants' quarters. I had saved money and arranged for us to take the early morning train to New York, where I have cousins who could hide us until we found work. Rose had endured terrible things from her father, things no daughter should endure, things I cannot write without my hand shaking with rage. Around 2 a.m. we heard Mr. Whitmore on the stairs. He was drunk, as he often was, and he was calling for Rose. She was terrified. We both were. I had taken a knife from the kitchen earlier that day, intending to use it only if we were discovered during our escape. But when Mr. Whitmore began pounding on Rose's locked door, demanding she open it, I knew we had run out of time. Rose unlocked the door, hoping to calm him, to convince him she had simply wanted privacy. But he saw our packed bags. He saw her dressed for travel. He understood immediately that she was trying to leave him. He went into a rage unlike anything I had ever witnessed. He grabbed Rose by the arms and began shaking her, screaming that she was ungrateful, that she belonged to him, that she would never leave. I tried to pull him away from her, but he was too strong. That's when I used the knife. Laura's hands trembled as she continued reading. I stabbed Mr. Whitmore in the shoulder, hoping only to wound him enough to make him release Rose. He turned on me then, and in the struggle, Rose tried to help me. She pushed her father away from me, and he stumbled backward toward the stairs, but he was still strong, still furious. He grabbed Rose and I watched him throw her down the stairs. I heard her body hit the landing, heard the terrible sound of her neck breaking. I ran to her, but she was already gone. Her eyes were open, but there was nothing behind them anymore. Mr. Whitmore stood at the top of the stairs, blood seeping through his shirt from where I had stabbed him, and he looked at what he had done. Then he looked at me and said, "You will leave now, and you will never speak of this. If you do, I will tell the police you murdered my daughter, and you will hang for it. Who do you think they will believe? Me or an Irish immigrant servant?" He was right. I had no proof, no witness, no power. He could shape the story however he wanted, and I would be blamed. So I ran. I took nothing but the small bag I had packed, and I left Rose's body there on those stairs with her murderer standing over her. I am writing this now, and hiding it where I pray someone will someday find it. Rose Whitmore was murdered by her father on June 15, 1891. She was brave and kind and deserved a life of freedom. Instead, she got only death, and I could not save her. I will carry this guilt until I die. Catherine Murphy. Laura sat in stunned silence after reading Catherine's letter. Everything made sense now. The hidden knife in the photograph, the last afternoon of innocence, Rose's death attributed to a fall, Catherine's sudden disappearance. Harrison Whitmore had murdered his own daughter and gotten away with it, protected by his wealth and social standing. But what had happened to Catherine? Had she escaped and built a new life? Or had Harrison Whitmore tracked her down and silenced her? Laura began searching immigration and census records, looking for any trace of Catherine Murphy after June 1891. It was a common name, which made the search difficult, but she had some specific details. Irish immigrant born 1871, likely traveling alone, possibly heading to New York. After days of searching, Laura found a ship manifest from July 1891, the SS Germanic, sailing from Boston to Liverpool, England. Among the passenger list was a Katie Murphy, age 20, domestic servant, traveling alone. The timing fit perfectly. Catherine could have used her savings to book passage back to Europe, putting an ocean between herself and Harrison Whitmore. But why England instead of Ireland? Laura searched further and found her answer in British census records from 1891. In Liverpool, there was a Catherine Murphy, age 20, born Ireland, occupation, factory worker. She was using her real name, probably because she felt safe enough that far from Boston. Laura traced Catherine through subsequent British censuses. In 1901, She appeared in Manchester, still working in factories, still unmarried. In 1911, she was living in a boarding house for working women in London, employed as a seamstress. The final record Laura found was a death certificate from 1931. Catherine Murphy had died in London at age 60. Cause of death: tuberculosis. The certificate noted one additional detail: no known surviving family. Catherine had spent 40 years in exile, carrying the guilt of Rose's death, never marrying, never returning to America. She had survived, but at what cost? She had lived an entire life in the shadow of that one terrible night. Laura felt tears streaming down her face. Both women had been victims of Harrison Whitmore's violence. One had died, and the other had been forced to live with the trauma and guilt for 4 decades. But there was one more piece of the puzzle Laura needed to understand: what had happened to Harrison Whitmore. Laura returned to the Whitmore family papers, this time searching for information about Harrison Whitmore's life after Rose's death. She expected to find records of a man who continued his life of privilege, protected by his wealth and social position, never facing consequences for murdering his daughter. What she found instead surprised her. Harrison Whitmore's personal correspondence from late 1891 showed a dramatic change. Letters to business associates became increasingly erratic and paranoid. In August 1891, he wrote to a colleague, "I am troubled by dreams and cannot find peace. The house feels haunted by memories I cannot escape." By October 1891, his handwriting had deteriorated, and the content of his letters became more disturbing. To his lawyer, "I see her everywhere, on the stairs, in doorways, in mirrors. She accuses me with her eyes, though she speaks no words. I fear I am losing my sanity." In December 1891, Harrison was admitted to McLean Hospital, a private psychiatric facility in Belmont, Massachusetts. The admission records, which Laura accessed through the hospital's historical archives, stated, "Patient exhibits severe melancholia, paranoid ideation, and persistent delusions involving his deceased daughter. Patient claims to be haunted and expresses belief that he is being punished for unspecified sins. Prognosis: poor. Harrison Whitmore never left McLean Hospital. He spent the remaining years of his life in treatment for what doctors at the time called brain fever, and what would likely be diagnosed today as severe post-traumatic stress and psychosis triggered by guilt. He died in the hospital on March 3, 1896, less than 5 years after Rose's death. The cause of death was listed as heart failure, but Laura found a note in his medical file from his treating physician. Patient had become increasingly withdrawn and refused to eat. In his final days, he spoke constantly of his daughter and begged for forgiveness. His death, though attributed to physical causes, was in truth a consequence of a broken mind and spirit. Harrison Whitmore had destroyed himself with guilt. While it wasn't the justice Rose deserved, it was a form of karmic consequence. Laura found one final document in the Whitmore papers: Harrison's will, executed shortly before his final decline. He had left his entire estate to charity, specifically to organizations supporting young women escaping domestic violence and abuse. There was a note attached, written in his shaking hand: "Let this fortune, built on cruelty, be used to protect those who suffer as my daughter suffered. I cannot undo what I have done, but perhaps this can save others from men like me." Laura compiled everything she had discovered into a comprehensive historical report: Rose's diary, Catherine's testimony, Dr. Hartley's medical notes, Officer Sullivan's investigation, the photograph with its hidden knife, and the tragic fates of everyone involved. She presented her findings to the Whitmore family first. Michelle, Eleanor's granddaughter, listened with tears streaming down her face as Laura explained what had really happened to Rose, the great-great-aunt she had never known. "We always wondered why there were no photographs of Rose after childhood," Michelle said quietly, "and why her name was never mentioned in family stories. Now we know. They were hiding the shame, the scandal. But Rose was the victim, and Catherine was trying to save her. They should both be remembered as they really were," Laura agreed. Together, they worked to create a memorial. The Whitmore family donated their Beacon Hill house to a nonprofit organization that provides housing for women escaping domestic violence. They renamed it the Rose Whitmore House in her honor. The photograph of Rose and Catherine on the porch was professionally restored and enlarged. It now hangs in the entrance hall of the Rose Whitmore House, with a plaque that tells the truth: Rose Whitmore, 1872, 1891, and Catherine Murphy, 1871-1931. Two friends who tried to save each other from violence. Rose lost her life. Catherine lost her home. Both are remembered here for their courage in the face of impossible circumstances. This house stands as a promise. No woman will face abuse alone, and every woman deserves a safe place to escape. Laura worked with genealogists to locate Catherine Murphy's distant relatives in Ireland. They were shocked to learn of their ancestor's story. Catherine had never contacted her family after leaving Boston, probably fearing she would bring danger to them. Catherine's relatives agreed to have her body exhumed from her unmarked grave in London and returned to Boston, where she was reburied in the same cemetery as Rose Whitmore. For the first time in 133 years, the two friends were together again. At the reburial ceremony, Laura read from Catherine's letter, the testimony she had hidden, hoping someone would someday find it and tell the truth. Over 100 people attended, including staff and residents of the Rose Whitmore house, historians, and members of both the Whitmore and Murphy families. Catherine Murphy and Rose Whitmore were not just victim and rescuer, Laura said, her voice carrying across the cemetery. They were friends who loved each other enough to risk everything for freedom. The knife Catherine hid in that photograph was not a weapon of violence. It was a tool of protection, of desperate hope. They deserved better than the fate they received, but their story can still save lives today. Every woman who finds safety at the Rose Whitmore house honors their memory. The photograph itself was donated to the Massachusetts Historical Society, where it became part of an exhibition on domestic violence in Victorian America. Thousands of visitors stopped to look at the two young women smiling on that porch, at the knife barely visible in Catherine's hands, and to read the story of their friendship and their tragedy. Laura kept a copy of the photograph on her office wall. She looked at it often, at Rose's defiant smile and Catherine's protective stance, at the moment of hope before everything fell apart. The image reminded her why historical truth mattered, not just for the dead, but for the living who needed to know that women had always fought back, always protected each other, and always deserved to be remembered. Rose and Catherine's story had been buried for 133 years, hidden by shame and power and violence. But now it was known, and it would not be forgotten again.